It was supposed to be a routine day in the holding area. Two police officers, feeling a mix of frustration and impatience, noticed a black female detainee, unaware of her identity. Something about her hair caught their attention. Maybe it was her defiant gaze or her quiet confidence. But they decided, without thinking twice, to forcibly shave a part of her hair. She said nothing at first, sitting calmly as they approached, their actions clumsy and disrespectful. The clippers buzzed, the strands of hair fell to the floor, and a small crowd of onlookers murmured. People gasped and whispered, but no one intervened immediately. What the officers didn't know was that this woman was not just anyone. She was the presiding judge in an upcoming case. A case involving the very officers who now thought they could treat her like any other detainee. The irony was monumental, though invisible at that moment. Her calm demeanor hid a storm of controlled anger. Every hair they removed, every disrespectful glance they gave was being noted and remembered. She didn't panic, didn't scream, and didn't retaliate physically. Instead, she remained composed, calculating her next move carefully. When the incident ended, the officers walked away, satisfied with what they thought was just disciplinary action. They had no idea the tables had already been turned. She was not powerless. In fact, she had already begun planning how the justice system would address this audacious disrespect. By the end of that day, the strands of hair on the floor were not the only things being noted. A seed of accountability had been planted, and the officers were about to face consequences they could never have imagined. The next morning, the judge arrived at the courthouse, her robe perfectly pressed and her demeanor composed. Inside, she reviewed the docket for the day. Her eyes scanned the list of cases, and then they landed on the names that made her chest tighten. The two officers from yesterday's incident. She couldn't believe it. The very men who had humiliated her, who had thought it was acceptable to shave her hair without consent, were now under her jurisdiction. They had no idea who they had disrespected, and the thought made her blood boil quietly beneath her calm exterior. As the courtroom filled with people, the officers entered, confident and unaware of the storm that awaited them. They smiled at colleagues and waved casually, completely oblivious to the fact that the woman they had humiliated was now the person in charge. The judge observed them carefully, noting their demeanor, their subtle arrogance, and their unawareness of the irony of the situation. She could feel the weight of justice shifting, and she allowed herself a small private smile. When the proceedings began, she maintained her professionalism, asking questions, reviewing evidence, and listening to testimony. But her mind was keenly aware of every subtle gesture from the officers. She watched their reactions, their nervous twitches when their names were mentioned, and the faint sweat forming on their brows as they realized they were under her scrutiny. It was a quiet, calculated power. She didn't need to yell or accuse. Her position alone reminded them who truly held authority. And for the first time, they were seeing her not as a detainee, not as someone they could control, but as the judge they had disrespected. By the end of the morning, it was clear. The officers were in for a lesson they would never forget. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the case began. The two officers, once confident and dismissive, now seemed tense and slightly unsettled. Every movement they made, every glance they threw around the room, carried a hint of anxiety they couldn't hide. The judge, calm and composed, reviewed the evidence before addressing the officers. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice firm but controlled, "you're here before the court to answer for your actions. I want you to be clear. This is not just about procedure. This is about respect, accountability, and the law you swore to uphold." The officers exchanged nervous looks. One of them stammered, We didn't realize." The judge's gaze cut him off. "You didn't realize? You forcibly disrespected someone under your control, unaware that she held authority over you. That is exactly what we are here to address." Whispers ran through the courtroom. Spectators and colleagues alike leaned in, sensing the tension in the air. The power dynamics had shifted completely. The officers, who had laughed and acted without consequence yesterday, were now fully aware of the gravity of their actions. As the hearing continued, the judge presented the facts in meticulous detail. Witnesses described the incident, security footage corroborated the events, and the courtroom hung on every word. The officers tried to justify themselves, but every excuse fell flat against the unwavering authority of the woman they had humiliated. By the end of the session, the officers were visibly shaken. Their arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the stark reality of accountability. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need theatrics. Her presence, her poise, and the undeniable authority of her position had spoken louder than any words could. It was a quiet, devastating reminder. Actions have consequences, and no one, no matter how powerful they think they are, can escape justice. After the courtroom session, the two officers sat silently, their heads bowed as the weight of the situation finally settled in. They had come in thinking this would be routine, maybe even inconsequential. Instead, they had been confronted by the very person they had humiliated, and her calm authority had left them exposed and powerless. The judge returned to her chambers, maintaining her composed exterior. Yet inwardly, she allowed herself a small sigh of relief. Justice had been served, not through anger or revenge, but through the proper channels of law and accountability. She had remained professional, yet firm, ensuring that the officers understood the gravity of their actions. Outside the courtroom, whispers followed the officers as they walked through the hall. Colleagues and onlookers exchanged knowing glances, impressed by the judge's composure and clarity. News of the incident and the courtroom confrontation began to spread. People were amazed at how she had handled the situation. A combination of calm authority, meticulous preparation, and moral fortitude. For the judge, this wasn't about humiliation, it was about respect. She knew the officers would remember this lesson for a long time. More importantly, it was a reminder that positions of power are not to be taken lightly, and that true authority commands respect, regardless of circumstance. As she settled into her chambers later that evening, the judge reflected on the ordeal. The incident had been humiliating, yes, but it had also reaffirmed her strength and resilience. She had turned a moment of disrespect into a powerful lesson, not just for the officers, but for everyone who witnessed it. Sometimes, justice is quiet. Sometimes, it's subtle. But when wielded correctly, it is unmistakable and unforgettable. The days following the courtroom incident were a whirlwind. The story of the officers shaving a black judge's hair, completely unaware of her role, spread quickly. Social media buzzed, news outlets picked up the story, and the public was captivated by the irony and the lesson in accountability. The officers faced formal disciplinary actions. The humiliation they had inflicted upon someone they underestimated had come full circle, and the consequences were tangible. Their careers, reputations, and credibility were now on the line, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Meanwhile, the judge returned to her daily duties, calm and composed. She maintained her usual poise, but those who knew her recognized the quiet strength she now exuded. She had turned what could have been a humiliating moment into a story of empowerment and justice. Her actions reminded everyone that authority, respect, and moral integrity are not optional, they are essential. Colleagues, courtroom staff, and even strangers reached out, commending her for handling the situation with dignity. Many admitted they would have lost their temper or allowed anger to guide them, but she had proven that patience, strategy, and composure are far more powerful than rash reactions. For the officers, the lesson was unforgettable. They had been arrogant, careless, and disrespectful, and the experience forced them to confront the consequences of their actions. They had underestimated the very person who held the ultimate authority over their fate. In the end, justice was served, but not through spectacle. It was served through quiet strength, professionalism, and unwavering adherence to the law. The judge's story became a powerful reminder. No one, regardless of their assumptions or position, is above accountability. And in that courtroom, that day, authority, respect, and justice were on full display. Unmistakable, unforgettable, and wholly deserved. Thank you so much for watching this story till the end. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even learned something from it. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, full of life lessons, drama, and emotions, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss an update. Your support means the world, and it helps me keep bringing you more inspiring and unforgettable stories. Stay tuned because more amazing stories are on the way.